Hello, learners, and welcome back to the course on social processes and behavioral issues. We are in Unit 5 and Session 3 of the course. So, today, what shall our session cover? We shall be looking at decision making in total, and we continue from the previous sessions where we spoke about leadership and decision making. In specific, in today's session, we shall be once again looking at the types of decisions, rational decision making model, bounded rationality in decision making model, intuitive and creative decisions, and decision making biases. So, moving on, what are the types of decisions? We had discussed this in detail in the previous class, in the previous session, but I would like to build on it in today's session as well to take through the entire session that I have planned for today. So, the three types of decisions are strategic decisions, which are at the most macro level where leaders strategize or leaders decide on the vision and the mission statement of the company and how best would they be implementing them. Then comes the part of tactical decision making, which is mostly made by managers, where they lay down the blueprint for executing or implementing the vision and the mission statement. And finally, the operational decisions, which are rather taken by every single employee in an organization basing on his or her own capabilities and his or her own hierarchy in the organization. Now, apart from the types of decisions which are taken in organizations, decision making is a very complex cognitive phenomena, and there have been several models which have attempted to explain that how individuals try to take decisions within the boundary of an organization. Now, we shall be discussing all of these prominent models which have attempted to decode decision making, explain decision making, and we start with the first. And the first such model is called as the rational model of decision making. Rationality means logic, and this model builds on the underlying principles of logic in decision making. So, according to the rational model of decision making happens in 8 distinct steps. The first is identify the problem. Always decision making starts with a problem. Let us say our problem here is less funds to meet payrolls. Then we move on to the next, which is definition of objectives. That is, how would we increase the cash flows in our organization? The third step follows from the second, that is, you make a pre decision, that means you decide to prioritize this problem for the time being and you build on the problem at hand. The fourth is generation of alternatives. This, in fact, is one of the most important steps of decision making, where we not only identify the problem, but we generate few alternatives or more alternatives or as many alternatives as possible to solve the problem. So, what can these alternatives be? They can be raising of prices, laying of workers, etc. The fifth step is equally important, and that means evaluations of all the alternatives that you generate. That is, for example, higher prices may lower sales. So, what are the strengths and weaknesses of every single alternative that you are generating? Then, the sixth is make a choice, that is, you decide to raise the prices slightly. Seventh is implement the choice, you raise in prices, that means you pick up this alternative as the best possible alternatives. And the eighth is you follow up. Do I have sufficient funds now? The eighth stage would once again go back to the first stage because decision making is a cyclical process. Now, the rational model of decision making presented a very clear, very logical view to decision making, but no model is without its own assumptions and criticisms of the very same assumptions on which it is built. So, what are the assumptions and inherent criticisms of the rational model of decision making? Now, the first assumption of the model is that decision makers have all the information. That is this always happening? Do the decision makers or do the managers have all the information in an uncertain and changing environment? Has been a counter question against the model. Very often, managers or leaders are forced to take decisions when sufficient information is not available to them. Now, how does that happen? Is the model able to explain it? Answer is no. Now, what is the second assumption? The second assumption is even more interesting, that decision makers are always smart. So, what does that mean? Does that mean that managers and leaders always make wise decisions? Do they never make faulty decisions? So, that's a counter question against this assumption, that do managers always make the right decisions? I think history of societies and history of organizations has seen many of faulty decisions which have resulted in great loss for societies and organizations alike. So, how would the model explain these faulty decisions? The third assumption of the model is that decision makers agree about what needs to be done. So, a counter question against this assumption is that do managers always have the same preferences for alternatives in making decisions on similar issues? Now, because these questions were largely left unanswered by the rational model, we move on to another, slightly more realistic and more relevant model to organizations, and one which has become very popular in organization sciences. This model is called as the bounded rationality model of decision making by March and Simon. So, what is the concept of bounded rationality? Bounded rationality means that decisions are often limited by the information that the managers have and the limits of their own rationality and the limits, of course, of time. Very often, managers are called to take decisions within a limited sphere of time with limited information that is available to them. Now, so the whole idea that managers are smart or leaders are smart, leaders are wise, and leaders have all the time in the world to collect information, generate alternatives, choose the best, and then take a decision is negated to a great extent by the bounded rationality model. Bounded rationality model has the view that decision makers may not have time, decision makers may not have information, decision makers have definite limits or definite boundaries to their rationality, and yet they take decisions. So that's the reason why this model was called as bounded rationality. That means information is limited to managers. So the second step is conflict. Naturally, when my information is limited, I would have conflicting views, goals, diverse interests, etc. The third, because of conflict, the third step arises, which is the coalition formation, that I establish my problem priorities and I try to gather support for the problem solution. The fourth step is the search for solution, and the fifth is interesting, which is called as satisficing decision behavior. Now, what is satisficing decision behavior? That means you select the option that is the most acceptable to the coalition. Now, this option may or may not the best possible alternative. You may not make the choice of the best possible alternative, but you will definitely make the choice of the alternative that is the most acceptable to the coalition at hand. Now, moving on from the bounded rationality of decision making, we also talk about intuition and creativity in decision making. The intuitive decision making model argues that in any given situation, experts making the decisions scan the environment for cues to recognize patterns. Now, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been tremendous amount of groups, research groups in different pharmaceutical companies that have been engaged in the production of a vaccine to combat this pandemic. Now, once the vaccines have been produced, the government needs to scan the environment to ascertain how would this vaccine be distributed, where would this vaccine be distributed, who would be the top priorities for vaccination, etc. So you constantly are in tune with the environment before you take any kind of decision. Now, one single choice is considered at a time. Now, moving on to creative decision making. Creativity in decision making, in fact, is one of the most talked about areas in decision making because creativity, which is the generation of new and novel ideas, has led to the birth not only of great products but also of great organizations. Now, creativity is a very individual process, and very often it's a very personal process as well, but efforts have been made to decode about the way in which creative decision making happens in an organization by individuals. So, Bohr and Erdogan have identified five different steps of creative decision making. Now, the first is problem recognition. Problem recognition is an inherent step in decision making where you think that there exists a problem that needs a solution. Now, this is true for rational model. This is also true for bounded rationality model and intuitive as well as with the creative model. The second is immersion, where decision makers are completely immersed in the problem that they have identified. The third is incubation, a phase where not much activity happens and where decision makers consciously pull out from the problem identified, but at an unconscious level, they are very much in sync with the problem. Then comes the fourth and most interesting, important step of creativity or creative decision making, and that's called as illumination. Illumination is basically the aha or the eureka moment where the decision makers arrive at a solution that, yes, this is the way in which I will proceed. And the last is verification. So there are, I mean, this chain has been repeated for to launch many brands, many iconic products, and iconic organizations. At an organizational level, we can cite the example of Google, which actually started as a student project by both its founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Now, if you look at a product, one of the most iconic products, Walkman, began with a problem recognition in the minds of the founder of Sony, Akio Morita, that music as a commodity or music as an experience needs to be portable. So people need to experience music not stationed at one place, but rather wherever they go. So in the next few steps, which is immersion, incubation, and illumination, it was that aha moment when Sony recognized that the product to make this problem or to solve this problem is the Walkman. That means people can carry it wherever they go. And of course, fifth is verification. That was the rolling out of the rolling of the Walkman, campaigning, marketing, advertising, and finally letting this product out in the market. And the rest, of course, is history. So there have been many iconic products, many iconic organizations which have followed the creative route in decision making. Now, if we look at the complex phenomena of decision making, I think one of the areas that we need to concentrate on is biases and errors in decision making. Decision making is not always a smart process where people always make the right decisions. There have been many instances in day to day functioning of the organizations where managers end up making very wrong decisions. So, what are these prominent biases in decision making? The first bias is towards implicit favorite. So, what is a implicit favorite? Implicit favorite decision is one's preferred decision alternative even before all other options have been considered. But what is decision making? Decision making is identifying a problem and generating numbers of ways in which you solve the problem. But implicit favorite is the preference of a particular solution because that is the way in which I would want to solve a problem even before I consider all other options at hand. In order to minimize this bias, Edward de Bono's six-act exercise is preferred, and I would urge my learners to take a sharper look at this exercise because it encourages lateral thinking in individuals. Now, moving on from implicit favorites, we arrive at hindsight bias. And what is hindsight bias? The tendency for people to perceive outcomes as more inevitable but only after they have occurred, that is hindsight, than they did before it had occurred, that is foresight. So, why does bias occur? Bias occurs as people feel good about being able to judge things accurately only after those things have occurred in reality. So it's in hindsight that we are talking. We do not use our foresight. Now, moving on, the next bias is called as person to sensitivity bias. Now, the tendency for people to give others too little credit when things are going poorly and too much credit when things are going well. So, you are between two extremes. If a person is doing well, he is greatly praised. or he is praised out of all proportions. But if a person has taken a faulty decision, he is discredited beyond all proportion. So, decision making naturally is not objective here, as one goes with the perception that what is good is very good and what is bad is very bad. Now, one such instance has been the election of George Bush as the United States President in 2001. The activities of Bush have always been magnified out of proportion, that whatever is good, whatever decisions were smart, were very smart, whatever decisions were poor, were very, very poor. Now, the next bias in question is escalation of commitment bias, which is an interesting bias having serious consequences in an organization. So, what does it mean? It's the tendency for individuals to continue to support previously unsuccessful courses of action. Now, this raises a very interesting question in our mind, that organizations are always concerned about bottom lines. Organizations need to make profit in order to survive in this fiercely competitive environment. So, good managers really make or stick to decisions, or pool in their resources, or pool in their time, energy, resources in events, in activities that are guaranteed to not generate a profit. Will managers make these kind of decisions? Answer is yes. Managers very often escalate commitment into causes that have previously not generated any profit. And the example is the Iridium project of Motorola, which went on for a long duration of 10 years, resulting in billions of dollars of losses for the organization, whereby it was because this was a unique project, one of its kind, which was the launch of the first satellite phones, and which came out with the tagline that geography is history. That means wherever you are in this world, you can be connected with one another. But Iridium was a doomed project from the start. But nevertheless, this project continued with sufficient fund inflows for 10 whole years. Now, conditions when people refrain from escalating commitment to a particular course of decision can also happen, particularly in the kind of world that we are today. People may refrain from escalation of commitment because this may challenge the very survival of the organization. Now, if we look at group decision making is not only limited to leaders and managers, but decision making also happens within groups. Now, there can be certain problems of group decision making. Now, what can be those problems? The first is wastage of time, because too many people need to agree to make a decision possible. There can be tremendous amount of group conflict, intimidation by the group leader, and the problem of groupthink. Groupthink, I think, is a very important concept in organization behavior that needs to be spoken about in greater detail. Now, the origins of groupthink were in the works of Irving Janis. Groupthink, so what is groupthink? Groupthink is the tendency for members of highly cohesive groups to so strongly conform to group pressures regarding a decision that they fail to think critically, rejecting the potentially correcting influences of outsiders. Now, the idea is that we've always gone with the idea that we need to have cohesion in a group. We need to have bonding in a group in order to function coherently, in order to function logically, in order to make decisions, in order to stick to decisions. But then there is a reverse question that comes in here, that if we have cohesion in the group, can that lead to a problem? The answer is, if there is too much cohesion in the group, if the group is very, very tightly knit, if the group is completely insular, that means it does not welcome any outside opinion, any outside influence, any outside pressure, then in that case it becomes very, very dangerous and potentially can cause great harm through the kind of decisions that the group may take. So groupthink can also take the shape of tremendous amount of pressure. Pressure for whom? Pressure for group members to conform with what the leader of the group or few of the members of the group think. So if you do not think alike, you will be asked to leave the group. And the consequences of groupthink have been very deadly and very, very challenging to deal with. One such example, which is considered as a classical example of groupthink, is the launch of the Challenger in NASA in 1986. Challenger was a space shuttle which was launched by NASA in 1986, and everybody would know that it disintegrated and when it was launched into space, leading to the death of all the scientists which were on board the Challenger. It was found that NASA was well aware of a design engineering fault in the Challenger, and there were dissents within the group that if Challenger is launched into space, then it may disintegrate and it may create great havoc. But there was also tremendous pressure on NASA as an organization to launch the Challenger and show to the world that they are very very advanced with technology and the other things. So, but this launch was a disaster, and this launch also ended with the deaths of very very reputed scientists of NASA. Now the question is, do we not know that this is something that may occur if the decision is taken? But nevertheless, Group Singh says that there are hundred such decisions which are taken day in and day out, where most decision makers know that the decision is wrong, but there is so much cohesion, so much pressure within the group to take the decision that these decisions are very often taken. So in today's class, if I were to recap, what have we gone through? We have built on the previous two sessions in Unit 5, where we have explored in greater detail about decision making. We started with the types of decisions, that what can be macro and micro level decisions in an organization. And then, of course, we dealt with the three interesting models of decision making. The first being the rational or logical model of decision making, then the bounded rationality model of decision making, the third being the intuitive and creative model of decision making. Finally, moving on to the erroneous process that decision making often is. That means there are biases and errors in decision making. So, at an individual level, what are these biases with us? We can have a bias towards an implicit favorite, we can have hindsight bias, person sensitivity bias, escalation of commitment bias, and then from individual decision making, we moved on to group decision making, where we looked at the problems that may occur while decisions are made in groups, namely wastage of time, group conflict, etc., and the interesting but deadly phenomena of groupthink that can occur in very, very tightly knit, cohesive, and insular group, where there is tremendous pressure on members to not dissent from the majority thinking or from the leader's way of thinking, and very often deadly decisions are made with great harmful consequences. And the classical example was that of NASA's launch of the Challenger, of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986. So, with this, we come to the end of Unit 5. Thank you, learners, for your patient attention. We will once again come back with more interesting sessions of the course. Thank you.